Okay, does it think we're live? It thinks we're live. I will see what we got. Okay, that's better. Okay, so we will see if it can handle 720p consistently. Now we're getting things moving, and there's myself. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if someone's watching, there's generally pre-roll ads. So we will give a second for those to complete, and we will get set up. Okay, so what we're doing today is working on my map. What I have so far for maps is I have one in vector. And the problem with vector is that it's getting overwhelming. I have too many layers. I have various randomized grid locations, I have city names, I have architecture, I have nation names, and it's all solid color, not very pretty. So what we're going to do today is make this a bit prettier. So let's grab open. We want to find my document. This was my test yesterday of various brushes. Oh, and I moved it. Where did I move it? So I have an exported copy of my vector map, which I'm hoping it's going to open here. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and start and draw on this. So first we want new layer. We're going to lock our background layer. You also see some of the artifacts I've got out of this vector map, some of my key for myself, and we are going to see how this goes. Now, I have not really used Pixelmator Pro much, but when I was doing tests yesterday, it had the best brush presets for making things look nice. So what we're going to do here is start at pens, and let's grab our 3-pixel gel pen and see what we can do. Now, ooh, that is too thin. Okay, so let's get a 6-pixel. Is that better? So the advantage of Pixelmator is I don't have Photoshop, and I'm not at the moment willing to, we're going to add a little more texture to this coastline, but I'm not willing at the moment to pay for Photoshop. That's something that maybe will happen in the future. Let's get that a little bit more of a, and my tablet is small because it's old, so I have to sometimes reposition my cursor here. And we're going to have a little bay there. And I'm getting close to the edge of my tablet again. Reset. And here we have inlet to a river. We'll probably complete that a little bit later. And we'll see how this is going to look. Okay. So, not too bad. I like it. We have a bit of a problem. Down here, that did not connect. So let's go ahead and connect that. Let's change the background as opacity. Where do I do that? As I say, this is, I've used Pixelmator itself, but Pixelmator Pro is a little bit different. And so I'm still not quite used to it. Where are the layer blending modes? I don't know. Add effects. Good heavens. No. No. I don't know. That's going to be something I will explore for later. Okay, so we're going to get the coastal outlines in 6. Let's go ahead and switch to 4 pixels, I think, for our terrain. So we're going to have a mountain here. In fact, we're going to have 2 mountains because I want 2 mountains in this location, and maybe 3. So we're going to just start with our little craggy mountains. We have a forest down there. So let's go ahead and hide our background. Oh, I was drawing on the background. And that's why you lock your background, folks. But I really want it a little more translucent. We will deal with that later. Now back up here. And doing this with the tablet is not easy, so we're going to do coastlines. I'm going to do new layer, new layer, new layer. Because we're going to need a bunch of these. So we're going to put coastlines there. We're going to put terrain. We're going to put forests. So terrain will be hills and mountains. Forest will be that. We will put cities and features. Do camel case for that. And that should help us in our map making. I actually should go over here. And see. I think it says one viewer, but that's just probably me, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. Since this is a test stream and first stream, really. So, what am I doing? I'm coming over here and letting people know I'm online. How do I do that? Where is that? Okay, so it says my bitrate's fine. What else are we looking for? Okay. Not sure if anyone, but this is a Discord I follow, so I figure I will play around with that and see if any of them want to be on. Okay. There we go. Oh, you know what? I probably need a bigger logo for that than apparently. That's okay, I can do that. So we're on terrain. Let's do some terrain here. You know what? Let's put a background layer and let's just fill it. Color fill. No, not black. Start with a yellow, move it over here, something a little more parchmenty. Sure. Color adjustments. Sure, let's do contrast. Nope, brightness. Sure, that'll be good enough for now, just so we have some sort of background. And I'm going to come back in here. Back to the little tiny Wacom old tablet. If I do this a lot, I'm going to definitely have to get a new... Ooh, no. Let's change it back to a better color. You're not quite all the way black. There we go. That should work. Yeah, and don't start near the edge of the tablet anyway, because we want... There we go. I like that. That's reasonable. And we'll put our little jaggedy lines on it. Make it look all craggly. Come back for shading later. Now we do have a forest here, so I am not nearly as good as a lot of other people on this, and I'm still working with the tools. There we go. Put like a little bit of trunk underneath there. Not that it matters. Okay. Okay, these are getting big. Just wall them up here. And that one is a little big, but that's okay. We'll have one big one. Trunk off that side. And this is like little clearings. We'll have a trunk there. And then we're going to say, what else did we have under here? How far did it go? It went all the way up to the mountains. That's my plan. So let's continue that all the way up to the mountains. You know what I should do? If I'm going to use this as a color for the various terrain features, let's move that over there so I have a preset. Okay, so, oops. And I put the terrain where I was going to put forests. I'm on the wrong layer. The good news is nothing is particularly difficult to move at this point because we can do a selection and we can just make that happen. There we go. I'm liking that. Look, what else did we have here? Okay, add a town down there. We have to have titles at some point put on the map. But I like where the mountains are. We know where the road is. Question is, what are we looking for? I think for coastlines we will still continue the rivers. Continue that up into the mountains. We'll come back and color this. Okay, so now we have a city. Utah. Now what I don't recall is off the top of my head what type of architecture I had said that they use. What kind of architecture do they use? And this is where we go back to reference material that I've written. So, actually, do I still have graphics open? I have the architecture. So what I had done was I built myself a little random generator to basically tell me, okay, so we've got wasps, we have Ugh, we have things on top of each other. Sonos no Alhambras. Okay. Just kind of features for reference. But that's not a big deal. So, I don't know. How do I want to design the cities? And the answer is, I'm not going to worry about that right now. So let's go somewhere else. Start working on all these other places. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our, I don't know if these are the best brushes for this, but they were better than the default built-in ones for GIMP or Pixelmator, the regular Pixelmator as opposed to Pixelmator Pro. And so that was kind of my deciding factor of why I am using Pixelmator Pro is because I have it. And it's similar in many respects to Photoshop, though obviously not as powerful. Just because the size of the companies, development resources makes a difference in that case, but so does cost. Ooh, I went off the edge of my little drawing pad. This is like an over 12-year-old Wacom, so it's kind of a small drawing area. There we go. I think we got the whole thing. Ooh, gaps. Where else are our gaps? And just right over there. It says Cult of the Changelings. I have no idea what that's going to be. I used a random generator to generate me a whole bunch of interesting locations and ideas. So apparently there's a cult. That'll be kind of fun to play with. Now, do we want to get started down here? Ooh. Any other small islands? Well, let's go ahead and get started with this guy. So my expectation here is that each of these hexes is about 72 miles when I kind of designed this. I had taken from, was it Donjon? They have a fractal world generator. And so I had taken a chunk of a world generated through that and had kind of taken this out of there. And I guesstimated, based on roughly Earth size, this would be about the size of Europe. And each of these hexes, and I overlaid the hexes and said about 72. Of course, then Matthew Colville came out with his Strongholds and Followers, and he tries to use 20-mile hexes. And one of the players in one of my games really likes Strongholds and Followers, and I don't disagree. It's kind of a fun thing. But of course, they use 20-mile hexes, which is fine, but then these hexes don't help us very much. So one of the advantages of not putting the scale on the map is I can say, they're about 60-mile hexes. Still pretty close, especially when you consider that I developed the hex size based on the assumption of non-Euclidean geometry, meaning the fact that maps are projections, they're probably more like 60-mile hexes here at this latitude anyway, because each hex would technically get smaller the further you get to the poles, because I had done the guesstimation based on the circumference of the Earth and the number of hexes on the map that was generated at the equator. So I don't have a problem whether we pretend that they are 72-mile hexes, that we pretend that they are 60-mile hexes. It's really not a big deal. I'm going to, at some point, have to figure out how I'm going to do nations. Is 6 pixel width sufficient? And I don't know. Probably, right? In theory? What do we think? If we turn this off and we zoom all the way out to basically the full size of the map, is that as a border sufficiently wide? I'm beginning to think not so much. I think we need a slightly wider line. So let's go ahead and duplicate. And we're going to edit the pen. What do we think? Ooh, no. But 9 is probably reasonable. Let's change its name to Coastlines. And done. Then we'll go ahead and zoom back in. And we'll have to start going back over where we've already gone, but that's okay. I think that matches more what I had here on the vector. Ended up being about 9 pixels. So that'll do. Now here's where it gets tricky because we're going to go over lines we've already drawn. Shouldn't be a big deal though, because we're thicker, and any jitter is just going to look like normal variation. Let's see, Ruined Shrine. One of my players decided to play a cleric of Melil, which is from the Forgotten Realms. Maybe I can make that a Ruined Shrine of Melil. Why not? Shrunken Shaft. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So there's some good documents of random generated features for wilderness hex crawls, is what they're called. And that's what this came from. I took a PDF and I put it into a definition document, and then I wrote because I was bored apparently, I wrote a Python generator so that I could just say, hey, I want 500 of these. Give me 500 random sites all at once. And then I just started going on the list and going down the hexes and throwing them on hexes. So I have no idea what these things are going to be until I spend some more time thinking about that. I have to clean up this line at some point. This is the problem with vector, is you do get a lot of these, even though they are noodly coastlines, they're not noodly enough in many respects. Because coastlines are very rough. And where did my cursor go? Woohoo! There you are. Adding a lot of minute texture. The other problem with vector is that the more texture you add, you end up with a much larger file size. Whereas with raster, it doesn't matter how much edge texture you add, it's pretty much all the same size based on the number of pixels in your file. And my vector file was getting sufficiently complicated that I was kind of running into limitations of being able to practically use it. So here we need a better player-facing map, nicer looking to get some nice prints out of it. Okay, ocean. That's kind of almost a joke title. I didn't mean it really to be, but we have an elf kingdom. That's what the green stands for here. And the brown was halflings, orange is gnomes. Here we got a lake. I'm going to imagine that it's actually connected by a little river inlet there, because that makes a lot of sense. And we'll come back and get some of those hills and the bamboo forests. Quatoa. I like how this one came out, that I did the random generator and it's like, hey, this whole area, when you assign these randomly, ends up being really good roads. Okay, sure. Castle Spears. Definitely some interesting hook ideas now. Where did I end that line? Right there. And so you'll see I've got a little bit of gaps. We'll fill those in shortly. I know that streaming this early in the morning is probably not when most people, at least in North America, are on. But this is kind of the time I have to do this. And I think I'm getting a little parched and I need a drink of water, and I did not bring a beverage in with me this morning. Okay, let's take a break and go down here to these islands here that are kind of almost on the edges. In the meantime, let me clear my throat. There we go. Okay. So this is going to end up being wherever the off the map is. And I may extend these off the map a little bit more, but they're pretty much just a couple of islands here off the edge. Where's that road go? I don't even know. That's okay. At some point we'll figure that out. Oh, and there's a reminder on my phone. Maintenance notification for work. Burrow of ground bees. Ooh, should they be giant bees? Giant bees would be fun. Well, we have giant snakes. That would make sense. Giant snakes that eat some of those giant bees in the area. Great if you're looking for honey, because you've got lots of honey maybe. Not so great if you're allergic to bee stings. Okay, it's been a while since I've used this tablet. It's actually working pretty well. Just small. Okay, so Shrine of the Drunken Master. I think what they had done a little bit was put in things that from other modules that they liked into the generator, and including movies, which is I think that exists. I think someone, I don't know if it's official, has made a Drunken Master archetype for 5th edition, which would be perfect that they came from that shrine. There's our swamp. I need to have a better swamp. Okay, and there's one of our giant cities. One of the biggest ones on the island continent of Bellflower. Some more bamboo. That is going to be a good question. How do I draw bamboo? I just grab some icons for the vector off of, what is it, openclipart.org, which is good. It's just very static looking because they're all the same. Not to mention, it's a lot of complexity. For the vector file to have so many little noodly trees. So now in Illustrator, they would compact some of that complexity by making it symbols in a symbol sprayer, but I don't use, for the same reason I don't use Photoshop. So that's just not in my current budget. Well, that's the dot of the eye. I'm like, what is that? And there we go. Floating Shrine of the Living. Crumbling Shrine of the Dead. It's fun that those are kind of near the same place. A bunch of shrines in that area. Let's go over here. Nation that calls themselves the Great Architects. Along with the other nation that calls itself the Great Pinal, which they think all very highly of themselves. Owlbears! You want an owlbear? We know where to get one. Training owlbears. And scorpions. Owls and scorpions. Overly complicated city names. Yeah, that one may have to change. If I can't pronounce it in front of my players, I have to change it. That makes a difference. And so we're back over the main continent. Here's the conclave of equals. Well, it's aspirational, really. We'll see if anyone. There we go. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yes, that's good. Okay. And so I do have a couple of city maps. There's some really good generators that help. And this kind of gave the foundation for a lot of this, because sometimes you just need to come up with way too much as a DM that you have to beg, borrow, and steal. Not really steal, but there's good generators that make things a lot easier, especially as I have a group that is doing Starfinder. Starfinder, Spacefinder, I don't know. The science fantasy of Pathfinder. Here, you're going to come to a new planet every week. That's just a lot to have to generate. Go back to our continent. Random generators for the win. Rupak. I probably should go back and look at my, because I came up with a lot of the names of the cities before I came up with my naming convention for peoples. So in this case, the dwarves here actually use Asian names, not standard dwarven names in fantasy, just because I thought it would be interesting to do Asian style dwarves with not so much axes, but with pikes. Because pikes make a lot of sense for dwarves. They're short, it gives them a lot of reach. Great for tunnel fighting. So that's kind of where I went there. And speaking of dwarves, this is why we're talking about dwarves, is because I saw that abandoned dwarven mine. Dwarves were pushed up out of the underground cities due to some sort of cataclysm. I haven't really decided what that would be. I already have several cataclysms for the world in recent history, so we won't worry about defining that until we have something a little more in terms of a need for that in front of my players. But the advantage of having all these kind of with a title, almost none of these has something behind it. Right? These are just titles. These are really good roads to no towns. Actually, there's probably small, tiny settlements, and I've got to find that reference again. There was someone who was talking about that if you look at old or at maps of towns that have been around for a very long time, right, there's a distribution that is fairly regular, that if there's a road between two major points of interest, two major sets of resources typically, whether that's large cities, whether that's a mine, whether that's some valuable pasture land and somewhere else, that your distances between small towns tends to be about 6 miles. Because if you're dealing with inclement weather, you have heavy carts and loads, it makes sense to have some sort of way station to stop about every 6 miles. Right? On a good day, on a horse, you're moving a lot faster. But that's kind of the distribution, right? So if you have good roads, where any of these places say good roads on mine, you would expect that most likely what you have is for caravans, at least a town of a couple houses about every 6 miles, if the area is considered populated. Now, if it's not considered very populated and it's a road in the middle of nowhere, that happens. But most of the time, you're going to find that is the standard pre-automobile distribution of towns. Even with things like trains and such, you go back to like the United States in the 1960s, if it is some sort of route for trade, it is generally still about 6 to 11 miles, even with the advent of train systems between towns. And that's just kind of eyeballing it on a map on Google Maps. And so your distribution of towns is actually a lot more frequent than we sometimes give it credit for in D&D. Because when we're world building, that's just a lot of places to name and to create. But if it's a populated area, if it's got good roads, if it just has a path, right, that's a different story, right? People rarely go there. But if there's trade, you're going to have frequent towns. And that's just the way it is. That's the way we work. Having been out in a winter storm before, you need a place to stop, and you only get a few miles at a time. It is slow going in inclement weather. And so it makes sense why they did that. Maps of England are kind of fun that way. You go to Google Maps in England and you see how many towns dot that area. Right, it's just interesting. And how many names. And that's the Dungeon Master's bane, is I have to come up with 1,000 names. No, you don't. You just make it up when the players arrive. But have a naming convention, right? If things make sense, and you have a way to. History of names is interesting. There's some really good articles on Wikipedia about naming. Oh, do I have some sort of wispy something or other that ended up there? Nope, that must be on the vector export. Interesting, got this little wispy deal going on there. I don't know what that's about. That's okay. We don't really care. So, there we go. The Castle Folly. Whose folly was it? The Dragon Ghost Minaret. It's a whole adventure right there. I have a mega dungeon in the mountains just east of this area. I've had a couple players just for fun. We did kind of a one-shot, and they went down, and I thought it was funny because it was around Thanksgiving time. Not this year, but a year or two ago. And I decided to make cranberry puddings, similar to black puddings, but they spurt and explode acid on you when you puncture them with slashing weapons. That was kind of fun. Also had a wizard, necromancer, who decided that, you know what, it's kind of fun to take giant bulls and make them into skeletons. Because why not? I think I used like a minotaur skeleton stat block or something. But it was kind of fun. Here we got a river through a forest with the book castle. Some sort of library castle. Question is, would that be in Watabe? Or would that be a separate location within that hex? The Sea Cave Lair of Hill Giants. And there we are. Yeah, I kind of figured no one's in the stream. The question is, if I broadcast under Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not playing, we're map making for Dungeons and Dragons. Do I broadcast under Dungeons and Dragons, or do I broadcast under art, which is what I'm currently doing? But most people who are looking for art are probably looking for, well, that's not pretty. You get the thumbnail for the stream. It's like, that's not an art. That's map making. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll play around with that. I know Matt Kova was saying people were really annoyed when he was doing world building, which is a lot of chatting. Well, this isn't really Dungeons and Dragons because you're not playing. It's like, yes, but there are many facets to this hobby. That is for sure. Painting minis, sculpting minis, map making, drawing. Background music would be nice. I've got to figure out what we can do for background music if I'm going to continue to stream. The problem, of course, being if I upload these to YouTube later, you have to comply with all those guidelines, and there's a lot of guidelines. And what it may amount to is I'm going to have to generate some music, which, since I'm not particularly musically inclined, may have to do with like some procedural generation. So they have what is known as rack synthesis, which, if you've seen a Matt Koval stream, you've seen, which I have mentioned him a lot of times on this, apparently, which is part of why I thought this might be fun to do, is because I've seen his world building streams, and they are fun. He does ramble a lot. I'm rambling a lot. That's kind of, if you're going to do it with other people, you do ramble a lot. Which is fine. Rambling is fun. Bactia, the city of Blarlock, the shrine of the lion. A lion? A sphinx? Yeah, some of these I think I'm going to revise the names of by the time we get to actually doing anything. Portomare and some of the others are a little bit different. Those I like. There's a guy in a sphinx. So shrine of the lion, guy in a sphinx. That kind of makes sense together, I suppose. Abandoned dwarf mine. We've got several of those going on around here. Actually, the other one was on the south side of the continent, so around here is relative. Okay. So, Yasu Oharu Atsuki. I really should check, because some of these was like, hey, that sounds like a cool thing. I should see if they're actually real words somewhere, because, you might be saying something you don't mean to. That's why I said I need to kind of review. But when I had to come to get a map out quick for players, I had to just start populating. Via Portus. See, but if it's from a Latin base, I probably know kind of what it means anyway, right? So, Via Portus, by means of a door, or a portal, or whatever. Right? Ruined castle with orcs. Here we get noodling on our continent here. Tuathanan. This is fun because this is kind of a little straight. You must pay passage, or we shall sink your ship. Where's my cursor? There it goes. And, ooh, where do I have this? Noodly coastline. And the Shrine of Scrolls. And another major river. Going into Chauvenholm. Horn. Can't even pronounce many things some days. This is where we would go to a smaller pen size. So that's Small Town R2. That's kind of old style D&D modules, had a letter and a number for their series and that kind of thing. So that's kind of my second kind of adventure location of something that I will reuse quite a bit. So that is that little black dot at the end there. It's a small, tiny little town in the mountains on a geothermal spring on an island in the middle of a lake. Which, even though it's high in the mountains and gets cold in winter, the geothermal springs make for a very nice habitable area. Okay, come on. There we go. I think I need to close some applications for performance reasons. I don't need that open at the moment. That should help. Herb Silva. So it's an urban area with trees. Makes sense. Giant's Walk. In a land known as Land of Titans. They think highly of themselves. Most countries do. This country is kind of divided basically by this river. It goes inland quite a ways and through the hills. See, Isocania, I like that. That's kind of where my players have started out with, is down here. Isocania, Lapismere, Mare, Portomare, Horaro. Those I quite like. Tillman, that seems quite a reasonable name. The Marrow Overlords. Hard to read that, but I happen to know what it says. Totem of the God Warrior. So, Tillman has two feuding dynasties, and they can't agree on which should be their capital. So they have two, at least for now. That could change. The Tower of Dead Souls. Very evocative names. Here we get to some more noodly bits. That is a lake. It needs an outlet. You end up with problems if lakes do not have outlets. They get stagnant or they get salty. So we're going to give that an outlet out to the sea. You'll have to have a good bridge because it has good roads. Here's the Duchy of Maltern. Independent duchy at that. Okay, let's go get this little island traced. And then go from there. Here we go. I probably need some hills and mountains, some small mountains in here, because geographically speaking, why? Especially because there are ocean currents that come from the east. No, from the west here. They come from the west to the east. And so this western portion is going to be windswept. It is going to be inundated with water. The reason this has survived is because they have strong stone and it's not weathered. But, so we need to add some mountains in here. But when I was using the stamps on the vector, they were a little big. So now that we're doing freehand instead of vector, that becomes a lot simpler. And there we go. At some point, I figure we will get to finishing the map, doing some adventure planning too. Or we'll just skip between the two on different days. Seems to make sense to me. Illusory gnomish castle. Question is, did that come from the random generator, or is that my brain? That it was an illusory castle and I added the gnome part? I don't know. I do not remember. Question is, some of these I'm like, am I going to like this? If I take away, oh yes, no, that actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to take away the other layer. That's a pretty good coastline. I like that. That's turning out pretty good. It's definitely better for close-ups than the vector, which begins to look very smooth when you zoom in, which is, in this case, not a feature. When doing logos, that is a very big feature and incredibly important. Now, none of the games that are set on this continent are super active right now, which is fine. This world of mine I've built in part because I didn't have a lot of active game sessions, so there's kind of parts of it that I've been toying with in my head for many years. And it doesn't really bother me that I'm doing this and not playing sometimes. I do have several active games right now, but one is Space Finder, which is kind of, I've gone ahead and said, though, the star system of Galarian happens to be in the same universe, so they're exploring areas near this planetary body, but they actually have not hit here. I don't expect they ever will, which is fine. So the setting is large enough. The idea was that I could do just about any RPG, including science fiction, within the setting. So I happen to know the star systems that surround this one. In fact, this is actually one of 9 habitable planets within a binary star system, which is highly improbable and has reasons behind it. I haven't come up with those reasons yet. That would probably be the basis for an entire campaign, which no one really has been asking for, that kind of campaign, so I haven't delved into that yet. But I do have, because we were doing a little bit of a Spelljammer type campaign, more of a two-shot. Yeah, we played in it, I think, 3 times on that game, and it was set inside the Cradle of Worlds, which to the people that are there is the entire universe of the 11 realms, 9 planets. People debate what the other 2 are. Some say they're planets that no longer exist. Some say actually all 9 planets are just one of the 11 realms, and the others are other dimensions. That's a popular elfish theory. what's really going on, the dragons might know, but they don't really share that information. And that is the star system. Outside that star system, if you actually were able to get outside the star system, there are a couple hundred planets that I have named, but that's it. And then I have kind of cornered off a section on the far left of that map, which is where my group in Starfinder currently is exploring, and we are essentially doing a version of Kingmaker, but in space. I don't know how that's going to work. We're not even finished with the first chapter. And that group tends to have things fizzle. They're far more fickle. And so that's a thing. I have another group for whom I am actually running an actual Kingmaker Pathfinder. So I've got a Starfinder, I've got a Pathfinder. I have a 5th edition game that's a little bit on hold right now, which is set in this setting. And then my brother has brother, his wife, and my sister are doing a West Marches style campaign. So depending on where you go on the map depends on who's DMing. So I have a gap there. Nope, I'm good. And so if you go north, it's one DM. If you go east, it's another. If you go west, it's another. And they're basing it off of the origination of the map of Faerun. So it's kind of set in a version of Faerun after a cataclysm, so it can basically be, the map can be edited at the whim of the Dungeon Masters when they so choose. So that's also a 5th edition game. And those are kind of the current ongoing games. The group that was doing this one in 5th edition had a cleric of music and a monk and a Yuan Ti sorcerer who has amnesia. And so that's my sister-in-law, and so my brother has her character sheet, and she is slowly learning who she actually is. She doesn't even know what she has proficiency in until she tries a skill, and it's like, oh, I have proficiency in that. And so that's kind of an interesting one. But it's very interesting because there's a warlock, there's a sorcerer, there's a cleric, and a monk. And so it's like 2 are along the lines of law and order, and 2 are very chaotic in nature, especially with a great old one themed warlock. And so that is going to definitely take on a chaos and law, chaos versus order bent to it. Oh, I need to use my lakes over here. Lakes. How are these connected? Let's say they're connected right down here. And we will say that there's a river that deposits that in the ocean, but it is an underground river, which is why it's a deep lake. It actually goes underground. And if you were to follow it all the way through, you would get to the ocean, just not the way you probably want to. Probably dead. Drowned. Pockenzom. Juice. Juice? I don't know. Minotaur Castle. It's very interesting. My players ran into a Minotaur. But not here. It was far to the west. They ran into the Minotaur. And didn't fight it. Minotaurs were a little high level, but the Minotaur was not aggressive, so they just stalked the Minotaur and left. Ledge of Giant Owls. Recently watched Lord of the Rings with my kids. I got to see the giant eagles. Actually, Lord of the Rings was a little bit ago, and we had just recently shown them. They're at the second movie of The Hobbit at the moment. So that was fun. Though we have to usually like, okay, calm down. Because it's like the amount of drama is more than they're used to, especially when you look at, kids' cartoons. So my son was getting shocked and falling over in his seat at some of the twists, which was kind of funny to watch. Because that's the point. Some of those are designed to surprise you, and he got surprised. A Green Man Shrine. Shrine of the Phoenix. Probably should come up with some generic shrine maps or find some online, since there's a number of shrines, and just vary them a little bit. Shrine of the Wax Tombs. Oops, that one's not connected. And here we go. Oop, we got a little bit of lag there. That is the problem when dealing with what is going to end up being a fairly large file and streaming at the same time. Sometimes you get a little bit of lag when it's saving back to disk. Kind of want to hey, just use my fingers to... But it's not a trackpad. It's an old draw pad. Digitizing pen. Ruins of the Bastard Temple. Amazing how often good roads show up, especially in connection with other good roads, given the fact that it was a random generator. Though good roads has a pretty good frequency of occurrence compared to some of the things. Crystal Falls. Yeah, that could be fun. What's with the Crystal Falls? Especially since I don't have really a river there. So maybe it's an underground river that had a bluff. There's some bluffs in that area. That would be kind of cool. Okay, so I think we have, other than we need to clean that up. We'll clean that line up as well in a little bit. We have the basics. That's looking pretty good. I like that. Who do we have? What are we missing? We're missing something. So I need to probably thicken the lines around the islands here to the left, and we have the whole region up here to the right. And I put it on the wrong layer. I put it on cities and features. Good news is we can copy and paste the whole thing to the other layer if need be, and merge layers. So I take this, and I take these two, I believe, and you should be able to, yes, merge those layers. And we'll create a new cities and features layer here in a bit. Coastlines. Okay. So up here we have the Republic of the Harping Thistle. And here we go. major cities on an island. And not a lot going on. I guess they have a wave cavern, right? Dwarven castle of doors. But here it just says large city. Here we go. Fiery tools. I think we probably end the stream here with finishing the outline of all the continents, and then we will proceed to call it a day and get ready for work. And we will probably try a different tact in terms of discoverability on Twitch next time I stream. And the question is, do we do more map? Do we do world building? Do we do... Not that I have any viewers to ask, what would you like to see? But here's another little lake or bay. Ooh, I like the fact that it's like a little bay. That's a great place for a fishing village, I would think. Or maybe they just cultivate shellfish. Right? That could be interesting. So this has, again, some Asian-inspired names. Cave bears and the Citadel of Lost Halflings. And the goal is to have enough interesting stuff that we could do multiple campaigns in this region. Which is why I'm spending time making the map. Citadel of Light. Reminds me of Sword of Light from the Slayers anime. Gauri Gabriev. So this actually just kind of goes out to another edge. So there's a slightly larger version of this map, which has kind of the whole planet. Very super rough. That just kind of goes out, kind of ends up with kind of rounded area up on top, and then that blob over to the right ends up there. And then there's a whole continent off both to the east. And there's a giant ocean off to the west. And southeast, there's another continent as well. So I'm thinking that's good. I will put borders in at some point. Am I missing islands out there? Or is that just deep water? That's just deep water. That's the Merfolk Kingdoms. And it is time for kids and wife to start getting up for the day, so I will stop and I will get prepared for work. Good news is I don't have to go anywhere. I can work from home, working on databases and whatnot. And we can mess with everything later. But good progress, and we will start adding mountains, we will start adding forests next time I doodle on this. I'm actually quite happy with this Wacom pad, even though it's 13, 14 years old. It's working pretty good. Small, but working well. So, signing off. Not that anyone's watching.